I now recognize Mr. Mills for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thanks for everyone who's here on this panel. Like many of you on this panel, I too served. And I'm proud to say that I was an Army combat veteran who had served and had spent time not just in Iraq, but also time in Afghanistan. But I'm also one that'll actually call things the way they are. We've allowed our operations to continue to be drug out, modified, changed with no clear military objectives. And the minute that we thought that we were nation builders, we had already lost our way. That is not the intent of the United States Armed Forces. You want counterterrorism, you want counterinsurgency strategies, we'll be the ones to go to. You want policing and nation building, that's not our role. So it was a failed strategy from the beginning whenever we actually got into that. You want to deal with FID strategies? I know that Lieutenant Colonel Mann knows all about being able to train asymmetrics and to be able to understand foreign internal defense. And all of you know what it is like to sacrifice. And that means a lot to me. You know, the same people who will come in this room, my colleagues on the left, and say, we should not politicize this, and yet politicize it. These are the same individuals that what they're really trying to say, and I'll go ahead and translate, is that we don't really want to uncover and actually have accountability for who is responsible and claims to be the commander-in-chief. That's what this is about. We left Americans behind. We left our Afghan allies behind to die. And we have to accept that. Like many of you, I couldn't sit there with my hands tied, because we all have to, when we die, answer for our talents and say we had a capacity, a capability, a skill set that we could utilize. So my team actually had gotten put together after Congressman Ronnie Jackson had called me and told me about this woman, Miriam, and her 3 children who were born and raised Amarillo, Texas natives, who were being left behind by the Biden administration. He called the DOD for help. They told him they were in the midst of withdrawal. He called the State Department. They told him they had text to find out where she was. Go to this gate. You can get in. Just wave your blue passport. There's an agreement with the Taliban. And we all know that was false. So instead of worrying about my political run in my candidacy, we put a team together of former squadron members, and we flew over there and actually attempted to rescue 28 AMSITs in our G650 who, with approved PPRs, our plane actually being modified with the carriage of a humanitarian aircraft. And as we're 2,000 off the feet on final approach, we were denied entry, which resulted in multiple different changes in our platform. But ultimately, we wouldn't be deterred, and we did conduct the very first successful overland rescue, making sure that mother, her 15-year-old son, her 11-year-old daughter, her 2-year-old daughter were allowed to come back to the country that they're a part of. You guys know something about that. And we will get answers. There will be accountability. And I'll have resignations or impeachments one way or another. Now, speaking on that, Sergeant, do you feel that if you would have been enabled to have actually have gone with the green light to take out what you had identified as a bolo, that would have prevented the incident that occurred on August 26 and preserved the 13 U.S. service members' lives?
Thank you, Congressman. What I can say is that a worst-case scenario of the individual that we fired upon, who we suspected to be the bomber, not being the bomber, someone in the crowd who is the bomber is going to think twice when they see someone else's face get caved in or their chest get caved in and killed. They're going to understand that America's paying attention, that we're going to take action for the things that are occurring and the threats that were prevalent during that time there.
I completely agree. And we know the psychological impact on the battlefield that a sniper can actually produce. Lieutenant Colonel Mann, do you believe that if we would have maintained our presence in Bagram Air Base with the force protection capabilities, but also the ability to have those buildings to do proper vetting so we didn't put over 70% of people unvetted onto this successful Operation Airlift, and I will use the actual rabbit ears, that we could have run 2 simultaneous runways, not just on HKIA but Bagram, and actually have led to a more successful and safer mission on the evacuation?
I do, Congressman. And I believe we could have also leveraged the power of the groups, of the volunteer groups, to assist in that as well in a more orderly and organized fashion.
You know, I'll tell you something. I'm sure that others in this room has actually incurred it as well. You know, after we had actually attempted to do multiple rescues of Americans and was thwarted by the Biden administration on multiple occasions, when we did finally get a successful evacuation, do you know what the CNN first headline was? State Department saves 4 Americans. And it wasn't until I went on to Hannity and I went on to McCallum and I started blasting the fact that this was untrue with photos just like the one I have behind me, did they actually retract their statements. Guess what? America is not defined by the United States government. America is defined by the American citizens who are not willing to sit back and do nothing. With that, I yield back.